Thank you.
I'd also just add in my, thank you, Chairman, additional minutes, that on the way to getting the price signal, particularly if we have to get it through a democratic rulemaking process, it's also important that the public not be misled by what is going on. And I see almost frantic efforts to mislead the public about the situation out of very well-heeled quarters of our economy. We did a little back-of-the-envelope calculation because most of the information is secret, and so I can't figure it out exactly. But it looks very much to us like those wonderful ExxonMobil ads that show their scientists with molecules floating around their heads and, you know, funny-looking little cars of the future and all that great stuff where they're showing how invested they are in a green future. It very much appears to us, based on our calculations from what information is public, that the advertising campaign has received more money than the underlying investment in those green technologies, which tells you something about how serious they are about it. And I would love to hear your thoughts following up on what you've said. I mean, it's a little bit like the buggy whip industry has the market clout to prevent the internal combustion engine from being built and is throwing money all around the Congress. And here we are, you know, standing firm with our buggy whip manufacturers. We're a generation later than that, but it seems very much kind of the same principle, if you agree. And how do we begin to kind of unearth that when so much money is in the hands of enormous institutions that are hugely invested in not being the loser that you are talking about in that revolution?
But you're really asking important questions, and I puzzled over it or really spent a lot of time trying to think it through. Look, you know, it was said of Brazil once that Brazil is the country of the future and always will be. And that's true of hydrogen. And, you know, these companies specialize in, as a friend of mine says, shiny object over here. Ooh, shiny object. And while you're focused on that shiny object over here, meanwhile, it's business as usual over here. And that's why we don't have energy policy in this country. We have energy politics. As Gallup says, our energy policy, our energy bills are the sum of all lobbies. They're simply the sum of all lobbies. There is no coherent long-term strategy playing out. And this gets to one of the fundamental differences.
At least not one related to energy.
Yeah, I'm sure it isn't. But it gets to really one of the fundamental problems of this. I often think about comparing civil rights and a green economy. Like, people say to me, well, how will you know when we have a green economy? How will you know when we have a real green revolution? What will it look like? Well, I say, well, two things for sure. Your per kilowatt cost of energy at home will be higher, but your bill will be lower because your home will be so much more efficient that the cost per kilowatt will be higher to install, but your actual bill will be lower. That's number one. But the other way you'll know we're having a real green revolution is when the word green disappears. There's no such thing as a green building. There's just a building because the codes, the building codes, are at the absolute highest efficiency. There's no such thing as a green car. There's just a car because you will not be allowed to build anything other than the most efficient, you know, high mileage vehicle. So our real goal is to make the word green disappear. That's what we did with the word civil rights. We don't only speak about civil rights in the exception, okay, when someone's civil rights are being violated. But we don't talk about civil rights movement anymore. That's over. We won. The word civil rights disappeared. We need to make the word green disappear. But let's think about civil rights. Well, how did we do it? One way we did that was we got 1 million people in the mall one day, and under the leadership and direction of Martin Luther King, and people like yourselves, legislators, espied them and said, there's 1 million people on the mall. They have a grievance. We are going to respond to it. The huge problem you have with this energy, with energy, and the difference with civil rights, is that the people most affected by our energy legislation haven't been born yet. They haven't been born yet. The people who are going to pay the real cost of our energy legislation haven't been born yet. And it's very hard to base a political movement on people who haven't been born yet. Unless we can get 1 million people on the mall, not at a rock concert, where someone has offset the carbon of the rock band flying in, but where you get 1 million people on the mall demanding what John's been talking about, a carbon tax or a cap and trade. That's really hard. That says 1 million people on the mall saying, hit me. But without that, it's going to be very hard to get the leverage against the entrenched companies who are simply defending what they perceive as their interests and their shareholders' interests.